Hello and welcome to this week's episode. I have got a very special guest this week. I have Ali here, who's going to be talking to you about what it's like to be pregnant when you've conceived via IVF. So hi, Ali.
Hi, Sally Ann. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, of course. So my name's Alyson Hewitt. I am 37. I'm a beauty therapist and I live in Coventry. I live with my husband and my two daughters conceived both through IVF, and they are 6 and 7 months.
That's really lovely. And I don't want to go into the conception element of IVF, but I'd really love to know about what happened once you conceived. So obviously you have two children. What's the age gaps between your children?
So they're 6 and 7 months, so kind of 5 years between the pair of them. And actually we did try in between for another, but it didn't work, unfortunately. So then our third round, we then conceived with my baby Summer, like I say, 7 months. So yeah, it's a hard journey to go through, but I don't think when you're pregnant, it doesn't change the level of anxiety. I think that does, unfortunately, that for me anyway, that carried on, especially with the first trimester. I think everybody feels a little bit anxious anyway. Yeah. But because of IVF, you know from day one, when you've had that embryo transferred, you know you've got it sat there, you hope for the first, the 2-week waits, and then you get your positive pregnancy test, fingers crossed for everyone, and then you just think, right, the next hurdle's 12 weeks, but you've got 10 weeks to wait, whereas some people might not even know they're pregnant. Yeah. But with IVF, you know that it's in there and it's hopefully growing beautifully. So that level of anxiety doesn't change. It just, for me, didn't get any easier. You go to the next hurdle and it's slightly easier, obviously, for when she gets to that first 12 weeks hurdle and you have your scan. And I suppose the good thing with IVF, you do have a 7-week or an 8-week scan just to check how everything's going. So it's quite nice, it's quite reassuring to get that first scan and see the little heartbeat flickering. And for me, I was so nauseous for the first trimester. And I'm sure most people are, they call it morning sickness. And sometimes it's all day. Yeah. And I do feel so terrible for people who have actual sickness. Yeah. That must be so debilitating because the nausea is bad enough, isn't it? It's just not funnest. And like I say, coupled with anxiety, it's tough. It's really tough. But at the same time, you're so elated because you've got that positive pregnancy test after all the hurdles you've been through for the weeks and months beforehand. It's a real mixed bag. It's a real mixed bag.
Was there a difference between the way that you felt in the first one to the second one?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's a great question. With my first, I was so naive. I kind of just thought, although I was anxious, I kind of thought, well, once I get to 12 weeks, I'll be absolutely fine. With my second, I had been going for acupuncture and actually would ring my acupuncturist and say, can I just come and see you because I'm not feeling so pregnant today? And she would say, of course. So I went to Sally Lisman and she was fantastic. And she would say, of course, come round and the next 2 hours, I've got a gap, come round and I'll just do your points and we'll see how you are. And she would just then reassure me and say, the baby's still there, don't worry, it's absolutely fine. But the first time I just expected everything to be plain sailing and obviously it was. But the second time I had to say I needed lots more reassurance. I think maybe because I knew what a gift it was to have a baby and kind of really desperately wanted another one. And not just for myself, but for a sibling, for my daughter. I know she really wanted another one because she always said, Mummy, can we have another baby? Can we have I'd really like a sister. Sometimes she'd say brother, not quite as much. But yeah, so I think the pressure was on a little bit more because she really wanted it as well.
one of the things that I hear regularly when I speak to clients of mine who've gone through the process of IVF is that they almost feel a little guilty for trying again.
Yes,
And they
very much.
almost have to justify that, well, it doesn't matter if it doesn't happen because obviously we've already got one.
Yes.
No one else says that.
No one else says that
No
at
one else
all.
has to put themselves in that position where they have to justify the reasons why they would like more children.
Yeah, I think I said that. I actually have said that on numerous occasions to my friends who have said, I'd really like it, not just for me, for my daughter. Whereas
Yeah.
nobody, like you say, nobody who doesn't go through it ever says that. They just say, oh, we'd really like to have more children.
Yeah.
And it's quite funny because, like you say, you do feel quite guilty, especially I'm part of a big community on Instagram, for example, with the Trying to Catch community. And you can go on about how you're feeling throughout your second IVF process, but you don't necessarily want to publicize it as much because you've already got one. And it's all very much and that's not a right or a wrong thing at all, because there are a lot of couples who've kind of conceived naturally and then had to IVF for a second child.
Yeah.
But when you've been through it once and then go through it again, and it's almost really difficult to then say, I'm pregnant for the second time, because you feel intense guilt for people who've maybe gone through the journey at the same time and it's their first time. Then maybe it didn't happen for them and maybe it did for you. And that opens a whole level of guilt as well. But it's quite nice in the fact that I am a part of that community, because it is a fantastic community. And I would completely recommend anyone going through IVF to reach out to people on Instagram and put in the hashtag TTC, and it brings up a whole new world of wonderful ladies and men who are going through it and have been through it, who are just the most supportive people.
Are there many men on there? I mean, how did your husband access support?
He actually didn't. He's not a big fan of social media or anything like that.
Yeah.
And he thinks it's funny when I say my Instagram friends. He's like, but you've never met them. I'm like, I know, but I chat to them probably just as much as I do my normal girlfriends.
Yeah.
And they're so supportive because they've been through it. But there are a couple of guys on there, and some people do it as a couple. Some people go on there and they say, oh, this is an account for me and my husband. And you can tell some of the posts are from the husband, but not as much as the ladies, unfortunately. And I think that must be tough for the guys, because it's just as much for them as it is for us. Obviously not going through the process and the pregnancy, but sometimes, they must need someone to say, oh gosh, my wife's been hormones raging, and sometimes I've had to bite my tongue. And that must be really difficult.
How were your communication levels during that first trimester, when you were really probably feeling extremely anxious and every time you went to the toilet, I can only imagine how that felt.
Yeah, to be honest, I probably didn't speak to my husband as much as I probably should have, because you kind of don't want to burden them, because you think they've got enough to worry about. They don't want to be, worrying. He doesn't want to be worrying about me as well, because like you say, every time you go, you kind of think, am I okay to wipe? Because you think, oh gosh. And they don't want to know about that kind of thing. Some men do, and my husband probably wouldn't. And that's just how we are. But I was quite fortunate to still have my friends and family that I would chat to about that side of it.
Yeah, I mean, one of the
than
things that I always talk about, certainly within the podcasts and within my book, is that overall, if you are male, you have a tendency to want to fix things, and there is nothing he could have fixed for you. So like you say, going in and having constant conversations about how it felt for you during that time would have been a little bit redundant, because there wasn't anything he could have said to sort of reassure you, because that wouldn't have been acceptable either. There wasn't, you just had to, like, we said earlier, put one foot in front of the other and just keep going and hope that every day brings another day and another day, and
That's
you
it.
get to that milestone of that scan
Yeah.
and the reassurance. And, you know, of course, once you're past the first trimester, you can't really relax, but you know you've passed a huge milestone.
That's a huge milestone. The 12-week scan was a huge milestone for me. Then the gender scan went at 16 weeks. That was the next one. And then probably 20 weeks was for me. And then 26 weeks for me was the biggest milestone that I desperately wanted to get, because you kind of think, well, then my child is viable.
Yeah.
And then they have to do something to try and save my child if she comes early. And that was the biggest milestone I wanted to get with both my pregnancies. That was when I kind of went, that's it now. I'm past the 26 weeks. They have to save my child if she came early. And I was so much happier after that, and so less anxious. And actually, I don't think I ever suffered with anxiety at all before IVF and before having children, because I never felt like there was anything to worry about. Whereas when you go through that process and you put yourself out there so openly, it's just, it then opens a whole level of anxiety, doesn't it, really? And it's something that you desperately want.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, really hard, because I would only imagine how many people around you were conceiving naturally and having their babies easily. And, you know, because it's probably really hard not to be, you know, kind of involved in your own like little journey, your own little world, and just hoping and praying that everything stays okay. Did you join classes and groups and other things when you were pregnant, in the first one particularly?
Yeah, absolutely. We went to like an antenatal class to understand with my husband, to understand a little bit more about, you know, what would happen during labour. And because you can talk to friends and family, but sometimes you just need someone who you don't know to say, this is what happens, this can go wrong, this can go right, and have both sides of the story. And actually, it was really useful for my husband, because he'd never experienced anything like that before. He'd never experienced anyone being pregnant, or anyone in the family even. So that was really helpful for him. I would definitely recommend it. And it was quite funny, because they made them do things like change nappies and give you a massage, which I absolutely lapped up. I loved that part of it, because I thought that was really nice. And just things like how to induce oxytocin and things like that, which we would never have known. And we actually met some really close friends who I still talk to on a daily basis now, which is really, really lovely. We met up when we had our babies every week at somebody's house, and obviously pre-COVID, with cakes and tea, and it was really, really special. And I have to say, it was just a really, really lovely experience, and I definitely recommend it. Definitely.
Did you talk about your experience during the class, or did you find out if anyone else was going through the same journey?
No one else was. We did speak about it a little bit, kind of how we got to that point, and no one else had. There was one who'd come close, but she had issues with her uterine lining, and she'd had some acupuncture, and that seemed to fix the problem.
Right. Acupuncture is definitely a really good way forward, isn't it? If you're in the sort of trying to conceive bracket and you think you could benefit from support, whether you decide to go down the IVF journey or not, acupuncture is still just very supportive of the whole process.
So supportive, absolutely. And it's really nice to know that your body's working as it should.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm very, very upon any holistic therapies, and just really think it supports, you know, you on so many levels. So obviously, you know, when you were going through the pregnancy, did you fall into the high risk category in terms of medical care?
I did, yeah, which I didn't realise. During my first pregnancy, I didn't see a consultant. It was just overlooked. And I had a very normal pregnancy, normal birth. in my second, when I'd seen my acupuncturist, she had said, oh, I know one of the consultants at the hospital you're going to. This is her name, and if you can ask for a consultant, I would definitely recommend her. And I said, oh, I didn't realize I would have to have a consultant because I didn't with my first. And she said, oh, well, you definitely should. So I thought, okay. So I asked my midwife, and she said, oh, yes, you should. So I then saw my consultant, and she said, we will induce you before 40 weeks. And I thought, that's strange, because that was never the case with my first. So she said, I think you were just overlooked, unfortunately. And luckily everything was fine, so it wasn't an issue. So I had lots of extra scans, and the baby was measuring, and my first baby was small. She was 5 pounds 10, which actually I didn't think that was quite small, because I'm quite a small person. So I thought I would just have a small baby, and thought that's not the case. And my second baby was a lot bigger, which was lovely. She was much more normal. And they said, because you've had a IVF conception, and because your first baby was a lot smaller, even though this baby is measuring the head, you still have these risk factors. And they say, there's a lot of research into it, that your placenta starts to deteriorate faster with an IVF pregnancy after 40 weeks, hence why they wanted to induce me. So I thought, I didn't really want to go for an induction. So during my last consultation with my consultant at the hospital, she did me a sweep at 37 weeks. Didn't really do anything. And then I saw my midwife for more sweeps to try and get the baby moving before 40 weeks, so then I wouldn't have to be induced, because it just wasn't what I really wanted. I know in the end you go with whatever is healthy for the baby, but ideally I really wanted to get her out before then, and luckily I did.
This is fascinating. So obviously I'm not aware of your story. So this is the first time I'm hearing it. And it's not the first time I've heard that somebody who's pregnant with an IVF pregnancy can fall through the gaps a little bit. And the main reason for that is because it's assumed that you're being taken care of by the people who helped you to conceive, and your scans will already have been organized by that person, or that team, or that, or wherever you're going. And I think that's quite common, is that if you access a particular hospital for a particular service, whether that's private or on the NHS, it is often assumed that they're carrying on their care with you. So it doesn't surprise me that you fell through the gaps a little bit. But interestingly, with your second pregnancy, where you then accessed consultant-led care, you were, for want of a better word, over cared for, and they then went the other way and tried to put interventions in your way to make your pregnancy abnormal, when actually it was perfectly normal and perfectly okay. And I want people who listen to this podcast to understand how important it is that they make sure that they don't tick a box and end up in a one-size-fits-all kind of category. Oh, you're IVF, you have an induction. Nothing
that's exactly
more,
how I felt.
nothing less. It's like, oh, you've ticked a box, therefore what we're going to do is pressurize you into having an intervention that may actually put your baby at more risk, but you won't know that, because we're taking care of you, and therefore we're going to make sure that anything that happens will be okay. And I think people need to understand that, who are listening, who may be on an IVF journey, that you can simply tick a box just because you've had your pregnancy began via IVF or ICSI, or all of the sort of different ways that the pregnancies can be supported these days. And I just feel it's such a shame that so many pregnant couples are going towards an induction for no reason.
Absolutely.
At all. And certainly by the time you get to the end of a pregnancy, you're not high risk anyway.
No.
You've made it. If your baby has grown in your womb past a certain point, you end up then becoming the same as everyone else.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
37 weeks. I would say 37 weeks for me would be a milestone for every single pregnancy, that you can now say, right, we're all in the same boat.
Yeah.
We're all able to, you know, be unticked from any boxes we were previously ticked under. So.
Yeah, I think it was quite shocking for me to hear, because I saw a different consultant. Unfortunately, during COVID, going to consultant appointments and scans and things was pretty horrendous. They were running very behind all the time. I waited 4 hours to see my consultant once, and that was when you're heavily pregnant, hot, just want to go and get a drink, just want to go and get, you know, something to eat, was pretty awful. And I'm not saying the NHS at all, because I think they're amazing, but it wasn't, that specific day wasn't a great day. There was lots of people being forgotten, left out, you know. It was just one of those days where it all seemed to run completely off course. And I saw a different consultant, because I think they just thought, we need to get this lady seen. I'd had my scan, like I say, waited this 4 hours to see a different consultant, who then just decided that she would say, oh, you're having this induction. And I kind of came away and I had a little cry about it, because I thought, oh gosh, I don't feel like my voice is being heard. I felt like that had been completely taken, my choice had been completely taken away. And I did my own research into what they had, what the consultant had told me about, you know, placentas deteriorating faster and that kind of situation. And I thought, okay, you are saying, obviously you're telling me the truth and this can happen, but you didn't tell me what percentage of this happens, or, you know, this happens to 1 in a million people or 1 in 100 people. It was never, that was never discussed. It was literally a case of, well, this is what happens, this is what can happen, so you're having an induction. And I really felt let down a little bit, and like I say, I just didn't feel like I could advocate for myself, whereas I'm quite a capable person, especially going through the process where you have to make decisions about certain drugs and things. And I kind of thought, oh gosh, I don't really know where I'm at with this. And my head was in a spin for a really long time. And I discussed it with my husband and some family members who actually did some research themselves into it, and said, but you can do whatever you want to do. You do not have to have an induction if you do not want to. And my sister, who is a midwife, said, it's your birth. You can do, if you want a home birth, you have a home birth. If you want a water birth, you have a water birth. Obviously, if it's allowed in the hospital you go to. And that then actually made me think, you know what, take a breather on this. I can do what I want to do, and I can have this baby in exactly the same way as I had my first, you know, all being well. And it did. And that's exactly what happened. I did have my baby exactly how I wanted. I didn't have an induction. And thank goodness that I found my voice and said, no, hang on. They wanted me to have an induction 4 days earlier than I wanted them to even think about it. Because I don't know if you're aware, when you go through your egg collection and the transfer, you then know when your baby is due, because you know when it was conceived. In hospital, when they do 12-week scan, they tell you when your due date is, whether that be different to what you know. And that is quite strange as well, because I did say to the lady who was the sonographer, oh, I know when the baby's due, because I know when she was conceived. And they gave me a different date. And I thought, that's so strange. But I'm telling you now, this is when she's due. But it was 4 days later, in their point of view. And I thought, oh, again, it's just ticking a box, isn't it?
Absolutely. That must be so frustrating. How did they vary between the first child and the second child?
Well, they said it was only a day on my first. It was
1 day for the first, and then 4 days.
Yeah, and it was 4 days for the second. they said she was going to be due on the 3rd of August, and actually she was due on the 31st of July, and she was born on the 29th. So it was all very, very close. And Honey, my first, was born on her actual due date.
Right.
But on my notes, it says 40+1. And it's like, but she wasn't. She was on her due date. But it's, it's one of those things you just have to let go.
Yeah, you have to play the game a little bit, don't you? And
Absolutely.
only stand up for yourself for the points that you feel really are relevant. But
it's like choosing your battles, isn't it?
Exactly. But of course, 4 days when you're facing an induction and they're basing that on a date can make a huge difference. And, I've had clients that have been a whole week's difference, or, slightly more. And that can be really tricky. Although, having said that, when I have encouraged them to reach out to a senior member of the team, maybe the head of midwifery or the deputy head of midwifery at the hospital that they're booked under, to say, look, an induction has been recommended to me. I believe my dates are out by this many days. I'm not prepared to accept an induction until this particular date. Inevitably, they'll say, that's absolutely fine. I will mark that on your notes, and we'll work to your dates if that's what you like, or would you, if that's what you choose. So I think there is a sense of negotiation when you are able to advocate for yourself, when you're able to find your voice and say what it is you feel strongly enough about. But like you say, at a 12-week scan, you're just kind of so grateful to see a heartbeat. You probably don't even want to even go down the road of saying, hang on a minute, can you just not put those dates down? So at the end of the day, that's you're just happy to see that, I suppose.
Absolutely. That's exactly it.
Yeah,
definitely.
I mean, on the whole, you've had 2 children and 2 very different sort of set of circumstances from what you've described. When you were planning your first birth, very different to planning your second, what were your thoughts around what you wanted for your birth?
I wanted it to be really calm, because we'd gone through the antenatal classes and they had said, dim lights, nice music, all that kind of thing is really conducive to getting oxytocin moving, getting your pregnancy going, getting your labour started, and that kind of thing. So I had said in my birth plan that I wanted it to be very calm, and we made a playlist, and like you do, when you seem to have a million hours to do these kind of things when you're on mat leave. And it was and I'd said also on my birth plan that I didn't want intervention. I wanted to have the time to discuss anything. So if something was kind of going a little bit awry, I wanted time to say, let's just have a little step back and think about these things. And I know my husband would have advocated all of those things for me. And I did say, don't offer me drugs. If I ask for them, absolutely. But if you say to me, oh, would you like a piece of cake? I'd take it. So don't offer me the drugs. I would just rather have gone, rather go down the kind of TENS machine, really natural, try and do it just gas and air. I really wanted a water bath, because I just think they're so lovely. You watch these videos and things and you think, oh, it seems so serene, doesn't it, really, in the chaos of being in labour. And that's exactly what happened. It was a lovely experience. At the time, you kind of think, oh, this pain is horrendous. But looking back on it, it was a very easy 16 hours, really. And it was the same with my second. With my first, I think with your first, you do go down the route of playlists, and you pack candles, and you pack, lavender, and you pack the whole world into a suitcase, don't you? Whereas with my second, I didn't make a birth plan. I knew in my head what I wanted, and my husband knew what I wanted. And we spoke about what we wanted to the midwife rather than have it written down. It was much more relaxed the second time, which I think is completely normal for everybody, because you've been through it once and you kind of think, I know what I'm doing now, really. I know what's coming. Whereas you don't with your first, you kind of think it'll be maybe not so painful. which it obviously it is. But I would definitely recommend a TENS machine. They are just fantastic at kind of getting you through those first stages, definitely.
How did you communicate your wishes to your partner when you were pregnant?
Well, I just think we just sat down and said, this is what I'd really like to do. And like I say, going through the antenatal classes, it was then quite obvious what we would do. I did say I wouldn't want a C-section because I'm absolutely terrified of surgery. I'm terrified of needles. I'm not quite sure how I got through IVF, to be honest. But obviously, if it comes to it, then you do it. But I really, really didn't want a C-section. That was one thing I did say. If we can really not, then I would rather. And we just sat down one day and I kind of said, right, I'm going to make a birth plan. And I wrote it all out. And he said, right, that's fine. That looks all good. And I wrote it all down and he said, yeah, I'm happy with that. If you're happy. And I'm like, yep, all good. We're happy with that. And that's how it kind of went, really.
You said that you felt really confident that he would be able to advocate for you. How I always ask people about, how do you sort of relax into that confidence? Because what did he say to really reassure you that he knew exactly how to sort of stand up for you if necessary?
It's just the type of person he is.
Right.
He is a really strong-minded human. And I know if I have said something, he would then advocate that completely. He would absolutely stick up for me till the death. Yeah. And it was quite funny actually because my mum hadn't seen my birth plan and she was with me. And I'd said at one point, I think I was going through transition. And I said, I just want an epidural now. I just want an epidural. And my mum said, right, I'm going to go and get someone because your mum's there to fix it there and then. That's what mums do.
Yeah.
And my husband said, hang on, just wait a minute. And he got the birth plan and he passed it over to my mum and she went, right, let's just see how we go for the next half an hour. And he gave my mum the look, like you do, like we best read it. And that's how it then panned out and I didn't need the epidural.
That's wonderful. Really, really good to hear. One of the things that I always say, it might sound very harsh, but I say that the birth partner can literally make or break the birth experience. And it sounds like a lot of responsibility on their shoulders, but actually it shouldn't be because a birth partner isn't there to do very much at all.
No.
They're not there to, get involved in the labor in any particular way unless you need them to put pressure on your lower back or to do a particular action. Overall, their job is to sit back and do very little unless they need to advocate and to keep you going and encourage what you've said on your birth plan. So what's amazing is, you were clearly able to let go of everything, knowing that he was well armed to advocate for you. I had a great conversation with my hairdresser a few years ago, who told me the story about her birth. And she said that her husband is the type of person that would typically say, well, they know best, they're fully trained, they know best. And she said to him in advance of her birth, you might think they know best, but in my birth, I'm the one who knows best and I'm the one who's going home with you. So he literally had her back the whole way through and she just was blown away, fell madly in love with him all over again because he took her word over everybody else's. And I think that's such an important message. Your body, your choice. You get to decide what happens to you. And even if someone comes along with advice or recommendations, as a team, as a birth team, you should discuss them and then let the doctor, midwife, etc. know your decision at any point that becomes relevant. And if you do that, then you're always keeping control for yourself. You're always
Yeah.
the one who is able to look back and say, well, that's a decision we made together.
Yeah, I
So
think it's really important to have that
absolutely.
control, definitely.
Absolutely. So, yeah, I mean, I just think it's such a wonderful thing to be able to know whoever is with you at your birth completely understands your wishes,
Yeah.
and they understand how to step up if necessary. So,
Yeah, I think it's just important to have that kind of support around you. And I think sometimes it's difficult for guys because they don't necessarily know the words. They don't know the
yeah,
words to kind of get you through that next level or that next hurdle. You know, I remember going into the bathroom into the hospital. We had a little room with a birthing pool in it, and I rang my sister because I just thought, I need somebody who knows this, who knows what to say. My midwife wasn't around. She'd gone off to look after somebody else. And my sister, being a midwife, I rang her and I said, I can't do it anymore. And she said, you can, because your body, this is what your body does. This is what your body is made to do. And she really spoke me through it with the right words. And I thought, and it was so nice to have that, because I know, like I say, men don't necessarily have those supportive words all the time, because
yeah,
they don't necessarily know how you feel all the time. And she just spoke me through kind of that 2 minutes where I was kind of having a bit of a wobble. And I think that would be always a good tip for a birth partner, to just try, and you might not have the right words, but find someone who does. If you
yeah.
know, if you're struggling.
Yeah, I always use
Definitely.
the marathon analogy of the idea that if you had decided to run a marathon and you'd spent 6 months training, and on the morning of the run, you were like, I really don't think I can do this. The last thing you would expect from the people around you is for them to say, well, just don't bother then. What we'll do is we'll go
Yeah.
out for lunch and we'll just like forget about the fact that you've planned this for 6 months and you've done all that training. You know, you would want them to say, you've got this,
Yeah.
you can do this. And then when they're on the sidelines cheering you on,
Mm-hmm.
again, they're there saying, go for it. And even if they can see you limping, crying, that doesn't mean that they get to bundle you in the car and drive you to the
Mm-hmm.
finish line. They're
Mm-hmm.
not there to fix it for you. They're there to just say, I'm right beside you. You're doing great.
Yeah.
Let's just keep going. And
Yeah.
if at any point a woman or birthing person changes their mind, that's fine. They don't have to
Yeah.
go through with the plan, the, you know, the thing that they've said that what they wanted to
Yeah.
achieve.
Yeah.
But it's not your job to say, I would give up if I were you.
Yeah.
As the birth
Exactly.
partner, you're there to
Yeah.
say, I'm here, let's just
Yeah.
keep going. So how
Yeah.
wonderful that you had those wise words from your sister in that moment,
Yeah. It was
because we
just
all need
perfect.
that. I don't know a single person that's gone through birth that hasn't had a wobble.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely. Because
understanding
you
what
kind
to
of,
say.
it's just it's such a surreal experience, isn't it? Because
Yeah,
you'd never go through that amount of pain in any other, you know,
time in your
joyous
life.
occasion.
Yeah, yeah,
Because it is,
yeah,
you're reaching for the end goal of taking your baby home.
yeah.
So yeah, it was definitely needed.
Absolutely. It's lovely to hear that story. Um, I'd really like to pick apart a little bit what it felt like in the second pregnancy, because when a woman has had one baby before and gone through labor and birth, I think it's very anxious when you're kind of like heading towards birth with your second and you know what's coming.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I did feel anxious about it, because I thought, how am I going to manage the pain again? Because you to a point you do forget about the pain. But I had to say, when it started, I remember thinking, oh, this is what it was like. Because it just, my second kicked in really quickly, and was having contractions really, 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 really fast from the word go. And leading up to that, I remember thinking, I'm going to have to do something, because I'm starting to kind of get like anxious nightmares about it, you know, like waking up thinking, I can't do this anymore. What am I going to do? And I actually did a bit of mindfulness just to try and kind of bring myself back to earth, because I felt like I was just floating away with this anxiety. And I felt like I needed to really anchor myself down. So I did some mindfulness, and that helped massively. And I was really heavily pregnant during the first lockdown. So I was homeschooling as well. And that helped to take my mind off things as well, because I was so busy with my first during the day. I didn't necessarily think about it so much. But it's always at night time, isn't it? You wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and you think, oh my goodness, what am I going to do? And that's, I have to say, mindfulness really, I got some apps on my phone and just doing some deep breaths and thinking and visualizing my first birth really helped, because it was so calm and so serene. You know, I first came out in the water and she didn't cry, and you know, it was really, really, really serene. It was just beautiful. And thinking a lot about that helped, because I thought, I've done it once, I'm definitely able to do it again. I'm very capable, and just trying to be as calm as possible helps massively. Just taking some time out of an evening just to sit and breathe. Yeah, especially after a long day.
Absolutely. I think it is really important to find the trust within yourself.
Yeah,
to remind yourself that you are made to do this. And to be able to ground yourself in that thought process.
Yeah, very much. Being a beauty therapist, I also did Reiki, and I was a Reiki practitioner, and doing some Reiki on myself helped as well, just to like bring myself back to earth.
Yeah,
really massively helped.
So yeah, that's. So what was it like being pregnant in COVID and giving birth?
Oh, it was just, it was surreal. It was really, really bizarre, because you kind of think you're on your mat leave, you're going to enjoy going out for, you know, I thought my little girl would be at school, I'd go out for a nice coffee and a cake, well, not coffee, but decaf tea and a cake, and just be very free. And then all of a sudden you're completely locked down in your house. You have no way of just getting out. And my best friend was pregnant at the same time. There's a month between the babies. We had plans, and you kind of think, I'm grieving for my mat leave here, because I expected to be able to just spend some time with my best friend, go out and do nice things, go out and buy stuff, you know, buy new baby things. Luckily we had lots from our first, but you kind of think you'll be able to just go and buy maternity pads and nipple shields and all the things that you need, and then we couldn't. And I was buying things off, you know, left, right and centre online, because you just go into a bit of a panic, like, oh my goodness, I'm not going to be able to get out and do things and get everything that you need. And the hospital, obviously, then I had to go on my own, because I would really have liked my husband to have come to the scans with me. My mum usually would have come to look after my little girl, and he wasn't allowed. We were there with masks and visors on, and it was all a bit scary, if I'm honest.
Yeah.
I felt really frightened of, what if I got COVID in my 3rd trimester? I'm a healthy 37-year-old, but what if I'm that 1% who needs what do they call it? Not incubating.
The ventilator.
Yes, ventilating. And then you can't be ventilated in your 3rd trimester. It's really difficult. And then then it opens a whole can of worms on how you feel about what happens if you go into hospital. And so yeah, it was a really, really scary time. And it was quite lonely, if I'm honest. It was really lonely, and the fact that actually I just wanted my husband to come to scans and enjoy our 2nd pregnancy with us, and he couldn't. It was just, that was completely taken away from us, and it felt really unjust. And I just thought, oh. But then at the same time, I'm still pregnant and everything's going well. What am I worrying about? So yeah, it was a mixed bag, but mainly lonely and mainly a bit scary, if I'm honest.
Yeah, I can only imagine how that must have felt. I mean, there's no doubt women are resilient, that,
Yeah.
we get on with it, but it is a shame. And I don't know if you've heard, but there was a massive campaign called But Not Maternity, because, at the time, certainly during the middle of the whole COVID year that we've had up to date, there was a time when you could go to the pub, you could go and, have a meal with your friends in a restaurant. Well, not necessarily friends, I can't remember the rules now, but you could go out with a bunch of people and do different things and play sports, but you couldn't attend your own child's scan, and that's just so sad that happened, that anybody went through that experience for what was the vast majority of the year. I think things are a lot better now. I
Yeah.
think that the campaign really made a difference to open the eyes of many hospitals to recognise that this wasn't an acceptable thing to do, and to put women in that situation. But I'm not quite sure that that is the case for all hospitals, so I have to be careful with what I'm saying. But
Yeah.
hopefully, very, very soon that will be gone, and that all pregnant people will be supported throughout any procedures that they go through, any appointments, any scans, particularly because,
Yeah.
coming back to the IVF journey, I just can't imagine. I know that you had a scan to confirm the pregnancy, but whether that was 6-7 weeks, you still had another 5 to go, before you went for that 12-week scan. And that's a really nerve-wracking time. And, I do applaud anyone that walked in for their scans and sat down alone, because I can't imagine how that must have been, especially when it wasn't good news and
Yeah.
pregnancy didn't
Yeah. I
continue.
mean, it must just be the most horrendous time anyway, but to be alone in that, I can't even imagine.
Yeah.
I really can't imagine. It's just heartbreaking. It really is. Really
Yeah.
heartbreaking.
So overall, in terms of your IVF journey, what advice would you give to pregnant women, birthing people, their partners, their families? Like, how, is there anything that you would like to say about your experience that you think they would benefit from knowing?
Um, especially for birth partners, I think during the process of IVF?
Anything to do with IVF, and then we can always come on to people who haven't had, just a general advice, top tip type thing after that.
I think just be present. Just be aware and be present and be with the woman going through it. If it means making her a cup of tea in the morning, or biting your lip if she's been a bit snappy because she's tired, it's just be present and really think about what you are saying. If it doesn't work, don't say, oh, it wasn't meant to be, because that's one thing that people just, it doesn't go down well. So just really think about, just be present. I think be present and just be kind. If you think your wife, girlfriend, birth partner's not being, rational, it's because she's probably completely exhausted from being in abuse. The abuse, and all the different drugs make you feel completely crazy sometimes. And you can be irrational, and you can be snappy and tired, and it can just throw you about completely. I mean, it's just a journey. And just be kind. Just absolutely be kind to that person all the time, because it's just what that person needs. And just to, run a bath. Just, some women are capable. Sometimes you just want someone to say, I ran you a bath so you can just chill. Or I've made dinner. Or if you haven't got the capability of making dinner, I've ordered as a takeaway. And just be present, I think, is the main thing. Just be there.
That's
Definitely.
really wonderful. That really is very helpful, but I think for so many people to hear, because it is a journey and it does end. It's not going to be like that forever. It's a means to
Absolutely.
an end, but
Yeah.
it still has to be something that is you know, seen as pleasant as possible. So the more you can offer support and kindness, the easier that journey will be,
Yeah,
definitely.
absolutely,
And
definitely.
and for anyone, regardless of how their pregnancy began, what's your top tip for birth partners in general about giving birth?
Oh, giving birth, a good strong hand to hold. You know, again, just to really just be there. And I know for me, just having my husband there to go, pass me this, I just need that. I'm having a moment. Can you just hold my hand? And you know, do a bit of research as well. You know, birth partners, do some research into what's happening with your wife's body, because then you'll know that, you know, how she might be feeling at that specific point. And don't panic. My husband had a little panic, but it all worked out in the end, luckily. And so try not to panic.
What did you get
Definitely.
out of your birth bag in the end? I'd love to know what you got out, because so many pack massive bags
You
and they
know,
don't get
you
anything
don't
out.
use half of it. I think all I had was a clean pair of clothes to change into, and the baby stuff, just what the baby was going home in. I think we had a couple of outfits because I think she was sick at one point. But I, because I had her in the water, just my swimwear. But I packed that. My first hospital bag was an actual big suitcase with every single, you know, hat, vest in every single size. Other than tiny baby, she needed tiny baby stuff. We didn't have any tiny baby stuff, so she went home in this thing that swamped her. But you know what? It doesn't care. It doesn't matter. No one cares what your baby goes home in, other than for the Instagram picture, obviously. But no, you don't know. You don't need to pack 1,000 things. Definitely don't.
It's funny because I use the example of people who pack whole suitcases regularly when I'm teaching, because it's so common when I'm working in a hospital with a client, and as we pass people in the corridor, there is always someone dragging a suitcase going from either one room to another room, or just arriving in labor or whatever, and it always makes me chuckle, because I know that bag will never get opened.
No.
And pre-COVID, I would always say to every client, leave the bag in the car, because when the baby is born, you'll have skin to skin. They won't even need clothes, and then you've got plenty of time after that first hour to pop out and get the stuff, and it's not in your way during the labor. But of course, during COVID, once you're in, you can't leave.
Yeah.
So people are actually taking 2 suitcases, because they've got, you know, change of clothes for each other,
Yeah.
they've got meals, they've got, you know, so many things in their bags.
Snacks and water as well.
Yeah,
You always need snacks and water.
always. It's a really good thing
Always.
to take.
Yeah, definitely.
Ali, it's been amazing.
Oh, it's been so lovely talking, Sally. Honestly, I'm so glad I had this chance to air my views. It's been really wonderful.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you came on and were able to offer this information out to other people, which I'm sure they will find incredibly valuable. So
I really hope so.
thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.